Let's talk about the biggest loser in the S&P 500. That would be Qualcomm. Last night, we had a surprise ruling in a California court, which found the company violated antitrust law with the pricing of its chips for cell phone makers. Now, in a related matter, Apple and Qualcomm settled earlier this year. That move sent shares of Qualcomm sharply higher as Street thinks, great, this is over. But in a note to clients on Wednesday, analysts at Bernstein said that while Qualcomm's settlement with Apple may have given the hope to some investors that the judge would soften in this case, if you go back to January, the way the judge spoke about Qualcomm then made it clear they didn't have a lot of sympathy for what Qualcomm had done with pricing those chips. I thought this was a great line from Bernstein. They said, in practice, we don't know what will happen next. And I think a lot of folks today feeling that way. Certainly the Street doesn't exactly know where to price Qualcomm because it's back to where it was a couple months ago.
And it makes you wonder why Apple settled. We were talking about this before, that they should have stood their ground because the judge was on their side. But, I think if you ask people at Apple, I have no specific insight, they will just say, you know what, and I know this to be a fact, there's no love lost. They don't want anything to do with this company. Yeah. And they just, if it costs them more money to just settle, even though ultimately they might have prevailed, they're just out. And so it's a chapter in the rearview mirror for Apple.
I think looking at the stock going back to before the decision, just so like the last month is kind of constructive, because you can see, frankly, even though you have a big sell-off today, it hasn't really given off since that Apple decision. Right. You got to go back a little bit further than this. Go back to March, April. Right. You still have a huge jump up. There you go. So it's not like today took away all of those big gains that we saw that Qualcomm got out of the Apple deal.
They have this huge market position in chips that connect cell phones to networks. I mean, that is their business, and it is an awfully good business, as the Chinese will tell you. And that's another wrinkle and another facet of this whole curious competitive position of Qualcomm.
Yeah, now we should note Qualcomm's general counsel coming out with a statement saying, we strongly disagree with the judge's conclusions, her interpretation of the facts, and her application of the law. Obviously, Qualcomm will appeal, and this will continue to go on.
And just one quick note about that general counsel. He used to be the general counsel of Apple. It's a small world out there.
It's a very small world.
You do wonder about those things where I guess you do the job as best you can, but it's an awfully awkward position, is it not?
Yeah.
Thinking about the sides of that exchange that you've argued in the course of a professional life.
Right.
I guess we've all kind of done it. You work at other media companies, but it's still quite
you really root. I mean, you root for a company. I mean, it's part of your DNA, and to just sort of change sides like that, it's hard. I mean, you don't see a lot of people. I mean, you see people changing jobs, going from Coke to Pepsi. People don't do that very often.
I just think
interesting little tidbit.
Yep. I think another thing with the Qualcomm story, though, to bring it back to the stock, certainly looking at a 6-month chart, it's a company without a lot of direction right now in the near term. That kind of stock action isn't particularly encouraging. But even go back 5 years, 10 years, stock just hasn't done a lot. And I think right now, stock's down 13% over the last 5 years. Certainly the S&P has done better than that. Obviously, it's going to be skewed by the way the stock behaved during the tech bubble, who among us. But if you look at what's happened to Qualcomm shares, really since 2004, 2005, it's kind of been dead money. Now, you're getting a dividend for that. It's not like you get nothing back for being a Qualcomm shareholder, but I think it just is an interesting position for a company that, like you said, Andy, it's in an amazing business, but what else does it do? Right?
Why didn't it return to shareholders? Yeah. I mean, I think it spends a lot of money. It's a very expensive business to be in.
And I just think that business model, well, now, of course, the business model is completely under question.
Right.
How it goes forward, this whole licensing bit.
Raise the dividend. It pays $250 a year to shareholders. That's, maybe the stock doesn't go anywhere, but that the point of owning a company is one day it gets to Qualcomm's life stage where it just is what it is, and it gives you all the money because you're a shareholder.
Certainly dead money since 2014.